Coming up on Arirang News. Later this week, President Yoon will leave for the United Arab Emirates and Switzerland. This is his first overseas tour of the year, and it'll center on the economy. Science, technology, and digital competitiveness are directly connected with South Korea's survival. This coming from President Yoon as he promises to fully support continuous innovation. China suspends issuing short-term visas for South Korean and Japanese visitors. It's Beijing's first retaliatory move against restrictions imposed on Chinese travelers to curb the spread of COVID-19. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in South Korea, and thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We begin at the nation's top office. President Yoon's first overseas tour of the year has been set, and it's to the United Arab Emirates and Davos, Switzerland. His 8-day two-nation tour, which begins this Saturday, is focused on the economy. Our Chief Presidential Office correspondent Moon Gon-young starts us off.
The economic diplomacy aspect of President Yoon's overseas tour this time can be summarized into three key words: UAE, attracting investment, and global solidarity.
President Yoon Suk-yeol's first foreign tour of the new year will take him to the United Arab Emirates and Switzerland from this weekend to next. And at the heart of it is summit-level economic diplomacy. Taking off on Saturday, Mr. Yoon's first stop will be Abu Dhabi for his first state visit as president, and a first to the West Asian country by a South Korean leader at the invitation of President Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. There, he'll visit South Korean troops at the AK unit, some 130 combat soldiers there to train UAE Special Forces, and the Baraka nuclear power plant, Korea's first overseas nuclear power plant construction project that kicked off under a $20 billion contract won in 2009.
We plan to significantly strengthen South Korea-UAE strategic cooperation in nuclear power, energy, investment, and the defense industry. Not only that, by accompanying an economic delegation of some 100 South Korean businesses, we'll provide all the necessary support to help our firms make entry into the UAE market.
On the 17th, President Yoon flies to Zurich for a meeting with Koreans living in Switzerland, then to Davos clusters the next day for a meeting with the CEOs of major multinationals and to promote South Korea's bid to host the 2030 World Expo. And on the 19th, Yoon will deliver a special address at the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum, which opens this year under the theme Cooperation in a Fragmented World. The president will wrap up his 8-day two-nation tour with a visit to the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich, a public research university which specializes in science and technology. As highlighted by the president himself, President Yoon plans to keep a salesman cap on more than anything else during this trip and on those planned for the rest of the year. Now, senior officials here at the presidential office say we can anticipate large-scale contracts and deals, especially in the defense industry, this tour around. Moon Gon-young, Arirang News.
Staying with the top office, President Yoon Suk-yeol renews his determination to make sure the government provides necessary support to foster science and telecommunications. This as he met today with the nation's leading figures in those sectors for a New Year's greeting. Our Kim Do-yeon with the details.
On Tuesday, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol promised strong support for the nation's science, technology, and communication sectors.
누리호 3차 발사, 우주항공청 출범을 통해 우주 경제 시대를 열기 위한 우주산업 생태계를 조성해 나가겠습니다. 인공지능 중심의 디지털 기술을 일상화해서 국민 누구나 디지털을 마음껏 활용할 수 있도록 하겠습니다. 인류의 보편적 가치를 기반으로 디지털 격차를 해소하기 위해 국제사회와도 적극 연대해 나갈 것입니다.
He also promised to foster talent in future industries while supporting respect for freedom and creativity and for scientists as they continue to take on new challenges and innovate. This pledge came as he attended a New Year's greeting event for the nation's leaders in science, technology, and communications. Among the 500 or so attendees were the president of the Korean Federation of Science and Technology Societies, Lee Jae-myung, and the president of the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, Lee Kwang-hyung. Private sector leaders in tech also came, including the co-vice chairman of Samsung Electronics, Han Jong-hee, and the CEO of Coupang, Kang Han-seung. According to the presidential office, this is the first visit to the annual event by a president in 7 years. And his decision to do so, is said, reflects his drive to foster the nation's science and technology sector. In fact, he believes it's crucial for the nation to focus on advancements in science and technology.
자랑스러운 과학기술인 정보방송통신인 여러분, 지금은 과학기술과 디지털 경쟁력이 국가의 미래뿐 아니라 우리의 생존과도 직결되는 시대입니다. 글로벌 기술 패권 경쟁이 심화하면서 첨단 과학기술을 중심으로 경제, 외교안보, 통상 등의 분야가 하나의 패키지로 움직이고 있습니다.
Leaders from these industries also had a chance to speak about their aims for 2023. They agreed that these are difficult times for the world, but science and technology can help guide the nation through them. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Beijing announced today tit-for-tat measures against South Korean nationals with visa restrictions. Seoul's foreign ministry was quick to express regrets following talks between the two countries' foreign chiefs the previous day. Choi Min-jung reports.
China has decided to suspend its short-term visa services for South Koreans starting Tuesday. This comes in retaliation for Seoul's strengthened anti-virus measures for inbound travelers from China. The Chinese embassy in Seoul made the announcement via WeChat, citing orders from Beijing. South Korean nationals can no longer get short-term visas for traveling or personal matters. The embassy also stated that the measure will be adjusted depending on whether Seoul decides to withdraw what Beijing calls discriminatory entry restrictions against China. Soon after the announcement, South Korea's foreign ministry expressed regret over China's decision.
We have already strengthened measures for entrance from China based on scientific and objective reasoning. We have communicated our stance to China through diplomatic channels, and communication between South Korea and China will continue regarding this matter.
As the spokesman said, South Korea's Foreign Minister Park Jin had already explained to his new Chinese counterpart Jin Gang that the stronger measures were imposed based on scientific grounds. This was discussed during their first talks over the phone on Monday night, where Park offered congratulations on Chin's recent inauguration. However, the new Chinese foreign minister expressed concerns, saying that he hopes that South Korea would uphold an objective and scientific attitude. South Korea ramped up its antivirus measures for entrance from China after seeing a jump in imported cases from the country. Under the current rules, people coming from China are required to show a negative COVID-19 test result before boarding the plane and take a PCR test upon arrival. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Following last month's meeting in Washington, senior diplomats from South Korea and the U.S. held high-level talks in Seoul to boost economic cooperation. They reaffirmed their commitment to resolve concerns surrounding the Inflation Reduction Act. Bae Eun-ji has more.
South Korea's second Vice Foreign Minister Lee Do-hun sat down with the U.S. Undersecretary of State for Economic Growth, Energy and the Environment, Jose Fernandez, on Tuesday. This comes about a month after they met in Washington in their senior economic dialogue. In a press conference afterwards, the two officials said they agreed to work together regarding concerns on the Biden administration's Inflation Reduction Act. Fernandez said the U.S. takes South Korea's concerns seriously and will keep communication channels open.
We've taken and we continue to take the ROK concerns about the law seriously, and we will continue to work together on the ROKs and other allies' IRA-related concerns as we move to implement the legislation.
The Inflation Reduction Act gives up to $7,500 in tax credits to buyers of electric vehicles assembled only in North America, sparking concerns that South Korean car makers like Hyundai Motor and Kia could lose ground in the U.S. market. Vice Foreign Minister Lee stressed that the U.S. is a key partner and said they reaffirmed efforts to address these concerns.
We reaffirm the U.S. commitment to continue joint efforts on establishing a reciprocal supply chain system and to ease discriminatory measures on South Korean companies.
The two officials also agreed to work together on a wide range of bilateral issues, including supply chains and climate change. They also made note of the 70th anniversary of the two countries' alliance this year. Fernandez will stay in Seoul until Wednesday before traveling to Japan for the 5th Annual Indo-Pacific Business Forum. Peunji, Arirang News.
The questioning of the main opposition Democratic Party's chairman Lee Jae-myung by the prosecutors is underway over alleged bribery related to corporate donations. He arrived at the prosecution office at around 10:30 a.m. on Tuesday and shook hands with supporters who were gathered outside. Over 30 members of his party were also there, including the floor leader Park Hong-gun. Before entering, Lee read out a speech in which he called the investigation a trap prepared by the political prosecution. He also added he'll confidently face the prosecution and win. The opposition leader is being questioned over allegations that he received illegal bribes from companies via Seongnam Football Club in the mid-2010s while serving as mayor of Seongnam City. He has been accused of relaxing architecture and development regulations for those companies in return. This is the first time in South Korea's history that the main opposition party leader has been investigated by the prosecution. Some concerning news on the economic front. South Korea recorded a current account deficit in November for the first time in 3 months. It's because of weaker outbound shipments driven by a decline in exports of chips in particular. Our Shin Ha-young explains.
Amid a continued drop in exports of semiconductors, South Korea's current account was in the red in November for the first time in 3 months. Preliminary data released by the Bank of Korea on Tuesday shows the country posted a current account deficit of $620 million. That's down by about $7.4 billion from the previous year. The goods balance, which tracks goods imports and exports, came to a deficit of $1.57 billion in November, falling more than $7.6 billion on year after recording a surplus a year earlier. When it comes to exports, the country exported $51.9 billion of goods, an on-year decrease of 14%. This was mainly due to weaker exports of chips and petroleum products. It's the third consecutive month of exports falling from the previous year after the country posted an on-year decrease in September for the first time in 23 months. Imports, on the other hand, saw an on-year rise of 2.7% to almost $58.9 billion with the growing cost of importing raw materials. Meanwhile, the service account, which tracks earnings and spending on overseas trips and transport, saw its deficit widen to $340 million. The accumulated current account from last January to November stands at a surplus of $24.3 billion. The BOK forecast back in November that the country's current account for 2022 would record a surplus of $25 billion. An official from the BOK hinted that the outlook is still valid.
As the trade deficit in December narrowed from the deficit in November, the country's current account for 2022 is expected to not stray far from the outlook.
To meet that outlook, the country would have to see a surplus of at least $600 million to $700 million in December. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
South Korean builders have clinched more than $30 billion of deals in overseas construction projects. This is from the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport, which estimated that Korean companies last year scored around $31 billion of construction orders. Projects in Asia accounted for almost 40%, while almost a third were in the Middle East. More than 300 domestic companies branched out to almost 100 countries and secured some 580 business deals. Businesses did meet setbacks due to Russia's war in Ukraine and the hike in prices of construction materials, but the overall orders rallied above that of 2021. The average age at marriage has risen in most industrial countries, and this is especially true for first-time brides here in Korea in recent years. Close to half of the brides in 2021 who tied the knot for the first time were in their 30s. Yoon reports.
The latest trend in weddings in South Korea is that there are now more brides in their 30s than in their 20s. The time that a woman's 20s were considered the most suitable age to be married is a thing of the past. According to data released by the Korean Statistical Information Service, KOSIS, on Tuesday, there were 190,000 marriages in 2021, of which 157,000 were first-time marriages. In terms of the age of women being married for the first time, some 76,900, or roughly half, were in their 30s. 71,263, or roughly 45.5%, were in their 20s. 6,564, or 4.2%, were in their 40s, while 798 teenagers tied the knot. This is the first time since records began in 1990 that the first marriages of women in their 30s exceeded those in their 20s. In the 1990s, the yearly average was 333,000 first-time brides in their 20s, far exceeding the 19,000 in their 30s. The figure in the 2000s was 241,000 in their 20s and 31,000 in their 30s. By the 2010s, the gap had narrowed to 173,000 in their 20s and 85,000 in their 30s. For men, 2005 was the year that the number of first-time grooms in their 30s exceeded those in their 20s. Data for 2021 shows that some 9% of men getting married for the first time were in their 40s. The average age of those getting wed for the first time is showing a certain increase to 31.1 years old for women and 33.4 for men. That is at least a 5-year increase from the average ages in 1991, which were 24.8 for women and 27.9 for men. 이은진, Arirang News.
Russia is continuing its relentless attacks around Bakhmut, particularly centered in the salt mining town of Soledar. The attack is believed to be part of Russia's move to get the salt and gypsum reserves buried underground. Shin Se-byuk reports.
Ukraine is reinforcing its position around Bakhmut and the neighboring salt mining town of Soledar in the eastern Donbas region. This followed days of intensified Russian assaults spearheaded by the Wagner mercenary group. Ukrainian military authorities said that its forces repelled Russian attempts to take the town of Soledar. But the country's deputy defense minister, Hanna Maryar, said on Telegram that Russian troops are regrouping for another attempt to capture the town, saying, quote-unquote, the enemy literally stepped over the corpses of their own soldiers. Regarding the situation in the town, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Monday said Ukraine is in an extremely difficult situation.
Everything is completely destroyed. There is almost no life left, and thousands of their people are lost. The whole land near Soledar is covered with the corpses of the invaders and scarred from the blows. This is what madness looks like.
The founder of the Wagner mercenary group and Russian President Vladimir Putin's powerful ally, Yevgeny Prigozhin, has been trying to capture Bakhmut and Soledar due to the region's significance in terms of the network and mineral mines. Prigozhin has said the region is capable of holding a big group of people at a depth of 80 to 100 meters and also a number of military vehicles. However, pundits say that Prigozhin in fact is eyeing the salt and gypsum reserves in Soledar that are believed to extend over 100 miles underground. In a regular media briefing on Monday, however, Moscow's defense ministry did not mention either Soledar or Bakhmut. This came a day after it faced criticism for an apparently false claim of a missile strike on a temporary Ukrainian barracks. Russia earlier claimed it killed 600 Ukrainian soldiers over the weekend in response to a deadly attack carried out by Kyiv over the New Year holiday. But multiple media outlets have said the claim could not be verified. 신새벽, Arirang News.
At least 17 people were killed in Peru on Monday in clashes with police as protests resumed demanding early elections and the release of Peru's jailed former president Pedro Castillo. According to the country's Human Rights Office, the latest casualties take the overall death toll from clashes with security forces to nearly 40. Protests began in Peru in early December following the removal and arrest of Castillo shortly after he tried to illegally dissolve Congress. The ex-leader is serving 18 months of pre-trial detention on charges of rebellion, which he denies. Protesters are also calling for the closure of Congress, changes to the Constitution, and for the resignation of President Dina Boluarte, who was Castillo's vice president. Over at the Vatican City, Pope Francis has condemned Iran for resorting to capital punishment against its protesters. In an annual speech to diplomats at the Vatican on Monday, the Pope denounced the death penalty worldwide, adding that it grossly violates the basic rights to life. He also claimed the death penalty in Iran against its people serves simply to fuel vengeance. Now, these remarks follow the executions of 4 protesters in Iran amid nationwide demonstrations demanding respect for women's dignity. Meanwhile, we share with you a rare piece of some good news for planet Earth. According to a UN report, our ozone layer is on a tangible path to healing. Song Yujin has more on this promising development.
The Earth's ozone layer is on track for recovery. That's according to a report published by the United Nations Environment Programme on Monday.
A UN-backed scientific panel confirmed that the phase-out of nearly 99% of banned ozone-depleting substances has succeeded in safeguarding the ozone layer, leading to a notable recovery of the ozone layer in the upper stratosphere and decreased human exposure to harmful ultraviolet rays from the sun.
The ozone layer is a thin part of the planet's atmosphere that absorbs most of the ultraviolet radiation from the sun. UV radiation can reach the Earth's surface if the layer is depleted, resulting in DNA damage, sunburn, and an increased risk of skin cancer. The report predicts that by 2040, the ozone layer above most parts of the world will have recovered to 1980 levels before the ozone hole was discovered by scientists in 1985. The Arctic will take around 5 more years to recover, while the Antarctic will see its ozone replenished in 26 years. That is, if protective efforts stay in place. One is the Montreal Protocol signed in 1987. The global agreement ratified by 198 parties regulates the consumption and production of ozone-depleting chemicals. This road to recovery also sets a good precedent for combating climate change. The Secretary General of the World Meteorological Organization says, quote, "Our success in phasing out ozone-eating chemicals shows us what can and must be done as a matter of urgency to transition away from fossil fuels, reduce greenhouse gases, and so limit temperature increase. But there are still risks ahead. One is geoengineering, a large-scale intervention in the planet's natural systems to counteract climate change."
The panel also examined new technologies, such as geoengineering for the first time, and warned that of the unintended impacts on the ozone layer caused by methods like stratospheric aerosol injection.
Stratospheric aerosol injection is putting aerosols into the stratosphere, aiming to reduce climate warming by creating a cooling effect. But the report warns this could in reverse affect ozone production, destruction rates, and movement. 송유진, 아리랑 뉴스.
Spells of mild weather will continue for the remainder of the week. Overall readings will keep rising from this point on, and by Thursday, daytime temperatures will be very warm at 12 degrees. With a rise in daytime highs, temperature gaps will also stay wide. Under such drastic fluctuation in temperatures, our immune systems tend to become weaker, so please be careful not to catch a cold. And finest concentrations will continue to stay high for the Seoul metropolitan area. For Gyeonggi-do province and the capital region, air quality will stand in the bad category. Expect conditions today dry for the East Coast for the time being. Dry conditions will persist until this Friday, which is when nationwide rain is in the forecast. Until then, please take extra precautions against wildfires. Tomorrow, Seoul and Daegu will be starting off at -2 degrees. And daily highs in Seoul will get up to 8 degrees. Gwangju 13, Jeju will be warm at 16 degrees. The entire nation will see showers this Friday, and a mix of rain and snowfall will continue until this Sunday. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world. That's all for today's newscast. Thank you for staying with us. We'll be back with the most up-to-date news tomorrow. Good night.
부산항에 그리운 내 형제여